Hey everyone, and welcome to Lifeway's webinar on the State of Discipleship. And we're going to talk today on how to foster a flourishing church through discipleship. I'm your host, Carol Pipes. I'm the Director of Communications at Lifeway, and with me are Chad Higgins, Senior Manager of Church Equipping at Lifeway, and we also have Scott McConnell, who is Executive Director of Lifeway Research.
Yeah,
Welcome, guys.
Yeah.
Hey, it's super good to be here. I'm really, really excited about this as both a guy who cares deeply about discipleship
Yep.
and research. Scott, I'm a big fan, my guy, always.
Scott is pretty amazing, and the Lifeway Research team is amazing.
We just try to keep throwing some numbers out there.
We all like numbers. I think they tell an amazing story.
They do tell an amazing story. And we know that it's really great to be able to have facts to kind of undergird the work that we're doing at Lifeway and in ministries in our local churches.
That's awesome.
So we're excited about this conversation we're going to have today. We're going to talk about Lifeway Research's recent study on discipleship, specifically diving into pastors' views on discipleship in their congregations. Our team, the Lifeway Research communications team here at Lifeway, released part 1 of this huge study on discipleship. We're specifically looking right now at pastors' views. And later in 2026, early 2026, we'll have research on churchgoers' views of discipleship. So that'll be really fun to kind of see where pastors are and then where churchgoers are. And we will have more webinars coming on future pieces of this study. Cool. So right now, we're unpacking research on the pastor's views. Be sure, and if you have questions that come up during the conversation, we're going to take some time at the end to do some Q&A. So put your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. And also, I hope you guys will chat with each other in the chat. So I'm sure you'll get some great information and insight from your colleagues who are joining us from all across the United States and even some from overseas. So welcome to all of you to this webinar. Scott, before we jump into the research, tell us a little bit of about Lifeway Research and the kinds of research that you guys do and what we'll be discussing.
Yeah. At Lifeway Research, we conduct primary research studies, which means they're new research studies on the church and on the culture. Our desire is for people to understand their context better so that they can make better decisions if they know what's going on around them, what other people are doing, what other people are thinking. And what makes quality research is having some really good sampling at the beginning, that we're not just calling our friends. It's a random sample of pastors, or we're using large national panels for some of our studies of churchgoers. And then we try to ask really objective questions and try to kind of stay neutral, stay unbiased throughout the process. And that's kind of what we're going to dive into today.
Great. That's great. All right. Chad, before we jump in, tell us a little bit about the team that you lead at Lifeway.
So I lead our church equipping team here at Lifeway. It is made up from each of the ministry areas. We have different people on my team that lead roundtable discussions, trainings, speaking at conferences all across the country. And so I know you guys believe this about your team. I think I have one of the most incredible teams at Lifeway, people that I just admire so greatly, that are able to speak into different ministry areas across the church. We work with you guys a lot as well, and writing for the research blog, those type of elements as well, and being communicators here on the webinars as well. And so I love this type of work. This kind of stuff helps our team greatly as we think through, like, how do we build trainings and talk to church leaders more than like I loved what you said. This isn't just like a random sampling of the people we know, right? Because even for my team, who is forward facing with a lot of church leaders across the country. It's not near as like extensive as the work you guys are doing when you're able to really look at, I mean, churches from all corners of the country, and different sizes, those type of things. And so this helps our work a lot as well. And so I'm looking forward to learning along with our listeners as well. So
Awesome. That's great. Okay, so let's dive in to the study. So when we hear the word discipleship, we were discussing this earlier before we even started the webinar. When people hear the word discipleship, different ideas or images come to mind for different people. So, and if you ask somebody, hey, what's your definition of discipleship? It would probably be different from the person, maybe down the street at another church. So, Scott, when you ask the open-ended question of pastors, what was top of mind for them when it comes to discipleship?
Yeah. And we didn't just ask them for a whole definition. We just said, give us a couple key components. And the first things that came to mind were spiritual growth, disciplines, and specifically Bible reading, and Bible memorization. Scripture came up a lot. So those were kind of the first things. But honestly, 3/4 of pastors mentioned something else. Okay. So there's a lot of things that come to mind because following Christ includes a lot of different activities. Right. And so a lot of different things were in pastors' minds, but spiritual growth and being in the Word were definitely some of the first things.
Okay. That sounds good. All right. So we know anecdotally that churches have a number of ways or approaches to discipleship. What does the research tell us about the different approaches to discipleship that churches are using?
The typical, 99% of churches are doing something. So they've got an approach. They're running at least one play.
So that's good.
That's very good.
News.
Very good. And the typical pastor mentioned 4. So they're running multiple plays to try to encourage people in their walk with Christ. Number one thing, 89% of pastors mention their own sermons. So just in the weekly worship services, that's an opportunity to be discipling. 7 out of 10 mentioned Sunday school classes. Almost as many mentioned small group Bible studies. Women's groups, a majority are discipling through women's groups. A majority are discipling at pastor-led teaching times at other times during the week. Might be a Sunday night, might be a Wednesday night. And then almost half mentioned men's groups or specific Bible study classes, kind of in-depth classes. And then almost a third mentioned mentoring or coaching or kind of one-on-one activities. And then the smallest was 14% saying accountability. So after they mentioned all those, we said, okay, if you only could pick one, what would be the most important thing out of that entire list? And I'd kind of break their answers into 3 groups. A third of them said their sermons. That would be the main thing. A third of them mentioned either Sunday school or small group Bible studies. And then a third was everything else. Okay. And the biggest of those was the pastor-led teaching times with 10%.
Okay. All right. So Chad, what stands out to you from that study, from that data? And does it align with what you're seeing in churches that you're working with?
Yeah, I think it definitely aligns. It's really interesting. And Scott, I love how you broke it down. And the lighter green on this survey gives us an idea of all of the things that they're doing. The darker green really hones into this idea of, okay, this is what we believe is most important. And I think for a lot of senior pastors who were surveyed in this, they're going to look at, okay, what is the thing that we know is happening every week, right? And for a lot of, I think, senior pastors that we talk to, I mean, even when you're trying to like multiply your efforts, right, of discipling the people that are walking into your church, a lot of places will begin to talk about, small groups or the Sunday school kind of method. But even within that, and talking with a lot of church leaders, it's no surprise to probably anybody in our chat, like finding qualified and capable leaders to lead these groups is difficult. And you know what I mean? Those type of things. And so I think it would be a miss from us of not understanding the churches that we work with
Yeah.
to believe that this is just some like easy thing, right? That we
Right.
can just jump into. And it's like, I'm sure all the people on our chat, they have a plethora of amazing small group leaders. But yeah, I find very few churches that are like, yeah, they're just falling out all over the place of like so many different leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, as we look through like how we're doing it, and as we talk through today, talking through like how do we measure these things, all of that, I think is gonna help us really fine tune and ask the question of, should these methods be where we like hang our hat on of the most important thing that we
Mm-hmm.
do, and looking through just the bandwidth of time and where we're investing energy and all of those
Right.
kind of things inside of our church.
Yeah. So one thing that stands out to me, definitely a variety of discipleship approaches that were listed and that came out in the study, but I think you can look at that and you can see that the majority of those approaches require relationship and physical proximity.
Yes.
So, Scott, what does the research tell us about pastors' views on the nature of discipleship, or kind of the how?
Yeah, we gave pastors a statement to respond to, and that was that discipleship is completed not in a program, but in relationships. And 95% of pastors agreed with that statement. And it's not that they were saying programs aren't important, because obviously that's some of the intentionality for where those relationships are built. But that's not what they're trusting in. They're trusting in the relationships. And then the other question we posed to them was the statement, discipleship is as effective virtually as it is in person.
Hmm.
And 3/4 of pastors disagreed with that statement, just 22% agreeing, just feeling that in-person presence in relationship is essential. And again, there are exceptions, and 1 out of 5 pastors actually thinks virtual works just as well. But the majority of pastors really see the value of face-to-face relationship building when we're talking about iron sharpening iron.
Right. Yeah. So, Chad, we also know that a lot of churches use different types of programs for discipleship. So, how should pastors and leaders be thinking about the reality that most churches try to disciple through programs, yet we know from the research they agree that discipleship happens in relationships?
Yeah. I think sometimes, and I hear it a lot in conversations, it's almost like sometimes there's a certain camp that tries to like pit program against relationship. And I don't know that that's necessarily true, especially as we talk about maybe even the idea of like Sunday morning, fitting into that like program. My encouragement to senior pastors and all church leaders in this area is, as we identify and we look at our programs of Sunday morning, that is like teacher led, or even like small groups. Just because we call it a small group or Sunday school class doesn't necessarily mean that there's like great relationship happening in those spaces. So the thing that I would really encourage leaders in as we look through this, and I mean, research is amazing as we look at the bigger picture, but I encourage all of our listeners today to be thinking through, one, how would I answer these questions?
Yeah.
But like, what are the processes that we also have in place? So if we identify relationship as being key, my question would be to ask, even for like a Sunday morning program, how are we thinking through connecting a brand new person, not just into, did I like it? You know what I mean? How are we utilizing Sunday morning to connect people into relationship?
Right.
Yep.
How are we evaluating our Sunday school classes and our small groups to ask the question of, are authentic relationships happening that create space for accountability, that create space to serve together, like those type of things? And so I think there's key questions that we want to ask and being thoughtful about relationship, as we're all agreeing that relationship is so important inside of discipleship.
I like that you mentioned that some people sometimes try to pit
Yeah.
program against relationship. But it's really great to think about the program as the tool
Yeah.
to create relationships. So you can create relationships and use those programs as tools for
Right.
that.
Yeah, because I mean, my opinion, what else is the point? You know what I
Right,
mean?
yeah.
Like, I mean, yeah, like even the idea of gathering with other believers and singing, like there's a communal element to that,
Yeah.
of getting to worship God together. And I think sometimes if we're not communicating the why
Mm.
to our people in the opportunities, then yeah, it becomes real easy. I think if COVID taught us anything, I think we saw a little bit of that pushback of even asking this question, can it happen virtually?
Mm.
To an audience who just showed you on the last one that like their sermon is a key piece. And so I could ask very easily the question, if we don't tie it to relationship, well, why can't I just sit at home and listen to the
watch.
sermon?
Right.
And I think that that's the tension there. So it's like, if we're not making it really well known, especially for a new visitor, we have more and more people that are, de-churched, that are coming into our church and asking like, why would I wake up at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning? And I think helping them understand like this longing for connection and relationship is found here.
Yeah.
And we're going to stand on God's word together. We're going to learn together and grow together is a very beautiful thing that I think a lot of our culture they're desiring authentic, real relationships. And I think the church doesn't need to shrink back from that, but from the top of the rooftops, yell like, hey, we want to do real life with you.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that we have to offer to this world who's isolated itself, thinking that it's in relationship through social media.
Yeah.
Even in our surveys of young adults, one of the reasons that many young adults stepped away from church is because they never built genuine relationships.
Right.
It wasn't that people weren't trying to set up the opportunity for them, but they just never clicked.
Yeah.
And so I think we've got work to do to set up those opportunities. But I think there's also an opportunity for us to really treat this as a prayer point. To be praying for the people within our church that they would build real friendships, real, not just here because we have to be here, because, it's what a disciple does, but we actually love one another. And that's what we're trying to foster. And we need the Holy Spirit's help in that process.
Right. That's great. Okay. So we've talked about approaches to discipleship. Let's talk a little bit about the study where you asked pastors about their satisfaction level with discipleship happening in their church and the ways they're measuring it. So, Scott, give us a snapshot of what pastor said when you asked them about, hey, how do you feel about the state of discipleship in your own church?
Yeah, they've got a front row seat. So we wanted to know what they're thinking. Right. And 52% of them say, I'm satisfied with the state of discipleship and spiritual formation in our local church.
52%.
So just half.
Okay.
So that means 48% disagreed.
Okay.
And the news actually gets a little worse. Within that 52%, only 8% are strongly agreeing that they're satisfied with the state of discipleship.
All right.
So that means 92% are admitting it could be better. And pastors don't like to open up that door. They like to be optimistic, but they're just being honest. They're saying, I'm seeing some good things, but it could definitely be better. And
how are they measuring?
Well, that's just it. Only 3 out of 10 say they have specific methods for measuring discipleship in their congregation. And so, the first question where we ask, how are they doing? A lot of them have nothing to base that on other than a few stories, some conversations. You have a feel. I'm not saying that you don't have a feel as a pastor or even as another late church leader.
Right.
You've got a feel for it, but the detail is in people's individuals' lives and in their hearts. And that's sometimes a disconnect.
Yeah. So Chad, he's just told us few pastors strongly agree they're satisfied with the state of discipleship in their churches. And few, it seems, are actually measuring or using specific measurements of discipleship. How have you seen churches gauge discipleship success? And why is it important for churches to have
Mm.
methods in place to measure discipleship? What does that look like?
Yeah, I do think that healthy churches have a plan for discipleship. I think that what we're talking about here, it requires some steps that are probably um, that are important to be able to measure some of this. I think one, we have to have a clear definition inside of each of our churches of your church and wherever,
Mhm.
Missouri or Tennessee or Maine, to be able to say, here in our community, in our church, like when we talk about discipleship, here's what we mean. Because Scott, you mentioned as we first started, like even amongst pastors, there's so many different definitions.
Mhm.
And I know that we're all oftentimes talking about this same thing, but we're also talking about something that is very vast.
Mm.
And we're talking about something that incorporates like looking at somebody's like not even just like pinpoint of their life, right?
Right.
Like even scripture to talk about like this is this like race to the end, like process for us, and so I think to have this like glimpse isn't as easy or measurement, but I do think that we have to be able to identify and communicate to our people, especially who are asking as if you're a new believer,
Oh, yeah.
like Jesus tells me to make disciples. What does that mean?
Right.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And how do we communicate that? And I think that gets away from that program question that we
Mhm.
talk about into relationship to where we can actually walk together, we eat together, those type of things. But it's a process that I would encourage all ministers to do with your team or your deacons or just key leaders in your church, to be able to sit down and ask those questions of, hey, as we talk about discipleship, what are going to be the things that we begin to measure or to look at?
Mm.
Because I know that, man, being a minister can be sometimes very discouraging. And if you think you're somehow going to like walk through decades of faithful ministry and not feel discouraged, well, somehow you think you're better than your master, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's important for us in the view of all of this to be able to identify for ourselves, what are we asking? What are we looking for? Are we just evaluating who showed up this week compared to last
Mm.
week? Or are we able to really start to ask the question of, if being in the Word at home is important, how do we begin to ask the question to know if that's happening at
Right.
home?
Yeah.
If we believe that serving is important, are we creating opportunities for our people to serve?
Mhm.
Um, if we believe that denying ourselves, right? That's a hard one to measure.
Yeah.
But are we creating ways for our people to share about it, to
Right.
be open? And I think that creates some strategy of being able to talk about it, to teach about it on Sunday morning, but then really allowing our people to engage with it rather than just hearing it.
Mm. So I loved what you said about how healthy churches have a plan for discipleship. Scott, I know that this study asked pastors about the discipleship plans in their churches. What did you discover?
We asked churches if they have an intentional discipleship plan
Okay.
for their church. And let me break their answers kind of into three groups.
Okay.
Almost half of them said they don't have a plan at all.
Okay.
Just no, we don't have a plan. A little over a quarter say each ministry within the church develops their own plan. So yes, we have a plan, but it's very decentralized within the church. And then just under a quarter say we have a single plan for discipleship for our church. It's a centralized plan.
Mhm.
We're all heading to the same place. We're talking the same language, and we're going at it.
Mm.
So yeah, half don't have a plan. That could be one place to start.
Right. So, Chad, seeing that you just said healthy churches have a plan, and we know only half have a plan, does that surprise you? Does that alarm you?
Um,
How does that make you feel?
oh man, it doesn't surprise me talking with
Mhm.
a lot of leaders, and it goes into what I was talking about. It's a hard thing to measure. The thing that I would encourage and remind us is, and it's what we showed on the very first graph. There's a lot happening in our churches.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of both program, relationships, mentoring that's happening that's unplanned. You know what I mean? Like that our people get together and just last week, me and my wife were having dinner with people in our church, like talking about like, how are we, shepherding our own kids and those type of things. Like, I think any pastor would point to that and go, yes, we would like that to happen in our churches.
Yeah.
I think for us, this isn't like we start over, right? Some of it is asking the question of what is the positioning of some of these? If somebody walks into your building on Sunday, how do we actually help them move from being a hearer of the word to hopefully they, you know what I mean, surrender, they're saved and they're baptized, and then what next? I think there's a way that we just think through that progression of an individual's journey in it and ask the question of what do we hope that it looks like? And asking those questions of where are we struggling at in that process? What do we need to address? And so it's not that we throw everything out, but hopefully asking those questions, we could identify, we have a real need in our church of developing better, women's ministry or men's ministry, or, man, we have no place in our church that real accountability can happen. So how do we encourage those type of things? Or even identifying not just the relational aspect of this. Some of the questions that churches need to ask are, what is the educational piece, right? We've got, I see this a lot in some of these really fast growing churches in our country, right? You're connecting with a lot of people, but the infrastructure of the growing in biblical literacy is not there. And so how do we incorporate great resources in this and those type of elements that can really help somebody grow from, I know nothing about the Bible to, okay, I at least understand some basic principles that's important.
Right.
When we followed up with pastors who have a plan, we kind of asked them the emphasis that they put within the plan. And almost half of them said we're emphasizing kind of the Bible knowledge piece.
Sure.
But then the second biggest group said they're emphasizing relationships. And so, yes, if we had asked pastors everything they're trying to do, both of those would be on the list.
Right.
But you do have to put some emphasis somewhere. And I think sometimes having the plan doesn't mean you say all of the activities we've been doing are wrong. Right. Just like you said, it's knowing the destination better so that everybody who's in those activities knows what we're trying to accomplish.
Right. Well, imagine I think a lot of times we create plans in ministry is so week to week often, right? It is Sunday to Sunday and then key holiday to key holiday.
Right.
And I think sometimes we even develop plans in that way. And I think that is far too short-sighted when we start to talk about discipleship. I mean, specifically when we start to look at it holistically across each of our age demographics. So let's not just talk about the person who walks in off the street here in discipleship. Let's talk about their kid, right? If you've got a preschooler, how do you begin to create a systematic plan in hopes that I'm going to have this kid for 12 years? Now we're really starting to think through, and it's not just like seasonal even. What do we want that kid to know, to understand about identity, purpose, all of these kind of things that if we take a step back and start to ask questions, not just seasonally, but like scope and sequence over years.
Right. Over the lifetime of a child who maybe is growing up in your church.
Because the reality too, to be able to address some of these, especially when we talk relationship, if we really get honest with our churches and as leaders and say, okay, man, we're a kind church, but man, we're maybe really struggling to help new people get connected. Then we can look at it seasonally and go, over the next 4 months, this is what we need to focus on. Then we can build upon that with biblical literacy. You know what I mean? Those type of things that you're setting foundational for. And a lot of times in my understanding and my experience in church, that's not always like up and to the left of a graph, right?
Uh-huh.
Oftentimes we're going to take 2 or 3 steps forward, 1 step back,
Mhm.
and that's okay. And I think pastors need to hear, like, if you think ministry is always up and to the left on your chart, buddy, I love you. We're going to have to circle back.
Right.
Right. And that's just, I think that's great leadership of having your finger on the pulse of
Yeah.
where your church is and the needs that they have.
So, what are some ways or resources that Lifeway is coming alongside churches to help them with those discipleship plans?
Well, obviously we have a lot of different resources. And as
Mhm.
we talk about, creating a plan allows you to know what you need.
Yeah.
But really, I don't want to even just focus on like the for purchase resources,
Right.
because Lifeway has a lot of amazing things out there that church leaders right now can really find. One of the first places that I'd recommend you go is to lifeway.com. Up in the right corner, you can hit the little bar down menu on ministries, go to the adult ministry section.
Mhm.
There's a discipleship newsletter that you can sign up for. That place also has articles as well, links to our podcast that we
Oh, that's
have,
great.
all about discipleship right from there. So liveway.com, adult ministry section has everything, as well as the stuff that you guys are putting out on Lifeway Research
Right.
is another place that I would point to. I think it is so important for us to understand and grow. I mean, as leaders and teachers, if we're not growing ourselves, we're not going to be very
Mhm.
inspiring, right?
Mhm.
And so I think those are some really great places to go. There's a new-ish resource out that I hear a lot of people talking about: deep discipleship.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's something I think for churches to really look at and engage with. One of the things that many of you may have heard about at the SBC this last year, Disciples Path. We're
Mhm.
working on that this year specifically to address some of what we're talking about and helping church leaders build out a plan of discipleship. We'll be launching that completely fully next SBC. So that is in the works right now.
That's really exciting.
We are very excited.
I've
about
heard a little bit about it. So, I know that that's going to be a great toolkit for churches to really help them develop a framework
Yeah.
for discipleship and some free assessments. And I love the fact that Lifeway is working on this tool that will be completely free
Yeah.
to churches to help them think through, hey, the assessment, how are we doing
Right.
in discipleship and all those other resources you mentioned.
Yeah, we really want to help them be able to identify like where their church is. And in the same way, Scott, your team is being able to like assess a national view for a senior pastor to actually just be able to look at their church. I mean, knowledge is really important in this. If we want to get past like, I think it's happening,
Right.
like we actually have to ask some important and tough questions.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, let's keep moving because we're running out of time. We've got a couple of more points and some more research we want to hit. Let's talk a little bit about roadblocks to making disciples. Most pastors and church leaders recognize that discipleship is important. We've seen that in the research. But we've also talked about it's not easy to do. So, Scott, share from the research, what are some of the top roadblocks for making disciples that pastors talked about?
Yeah. Pastors resonated with a lot of the roadblocks we listed. Almost 3/4 of them said people are not making discipleship a priority. More than 6 in 10 said people are being complacent. So similar idea, a little overlap there.
Yeah.
More than 4 out of 5 said they need more disciple makers. And if that was the only need in a church, that would be kind of a cool kind of a need, that you got people ready, but
Right.
it actually overlaps with some of these others. So they need more disciple makers, and people aren't real interested kind of all at the same time in many churches. And just that interest level shows up again, which again, that sounds like the first couple reasons, but it also kind of conveys that critical mass that like,
Mm.
if you show up and like nobody else is interested, you're kind of looking around going like, this isn't very fun. You feel that in student ministry, you know, if you don't have that critical mass, like
Mhm.
it's hard for the kids to have fun.
Yeah.
And same with adults too. Like if others aren't into this, it's not very fun for me either. But the truth is, more than a quarter of churches are just busy. They got other priorities, other things that are biblical things that they're working on that are important. And it's just hard to give discipleship always the work it requires. And it is a lot of work, you know, trying to foster relationships and trying to foster biblical community across an entire church is not an easy task, and not for just one person. Training is also something mentioned by at least a quarter of the pastors. 1 out of 5 mentioned difficulty in casting vision, which if you did that well, you know, maybe there wouldn't be so many complacent people. Maybe there'd be a little more interest. Obviously, a vision isn't automatic,
Right.
but it definitely is one way to encourage. Time is also something that came up with a lot of pastors. So that the typical pastor mentioned 3 roadblocks. So there's a lot. I mean, and again, some of these are heart level things. And, you know, so that when the writer of Hebrews says, spur one another on, I mean, you kind of feel that here in these answers of, you know, we kind of need a kick in the side a little bit as believers to be a part of this process of helping others follow Christ more closely.
Chad, any insights on how we can help churches overcome some of those roadblocks?
I think a lot of times we jump to scale really fast, like in our thinking, right? Like how do we disciple all of them over the next month?
Right.
And it just doesn't seem like that was often Jesus's model.
Right.
And I think some of this, I mean, we often think of our definition of discipleship in the way that we ourselves were discipled. And so I think if you're a minister who's discouraged by this, right, and feeling like, man, I want more and more discipleship in my church, my encouragement is always, that's a great heart. I do think that there's a level of reminding ourselves of what we're hoping our people model. And I think it's important for all ministers. So if you're a senior pastor, encouraging kids minister, your youth minister, even yourself, are there a few people that we're actually walking slowly with and discipling, not in the general setting, and realizing and believing that model is often what Jesus showed us in his relationship with his disciples. And I think that can often, it's good for our own heart of being a believer that just disciples a few, believing that they will also do that same method. And I think that can be encouraging for us in that process. I think it casts the vision to our people that we're not just the person on stage. Like, we are also believers called to make disciples. And I understand that's all of our work, right? I'm not downplaying that, but giving them the model of what it looks like. We see this a lot in student ministry. In student ministry, in teaching kids to be disciples, what do they see? They see the student minister on stage with a microphone or an influencer online.
Right.
And so they believe to disciple, I now either need a video camera or a microphone.
Right.
And I think that that's also true for adults. And they either are the Sunday school leader or they're not, because that's the way that they see discipleship happening. And so I think giving them the model and the image of, this is often over coffee, right? This is us having meals together. This is us taking car rides. You know what I mean? Those type of opportunities to disciple is something that they themselves can model.
That's really good. Our pastor at our church regularly talks about the men that he's discipling, and he talks about, hey, I have this guy that I'm meeting with at, I won't mention particular restaurants because I don't want to,
I mean, I'll get
support
the
any
gift cards.
particular
What do you want me
brands
to?
or anything like that. But they're meeting for lunch over
Yeah.
a burger and or chicken nuggets or something
Yeah.
like that, and talking about, and they're going through scripture together.
Yeah.
And so I know how my pastor is
Yep.
discipling people because he talks about it
Correct.
from the stage, which is an encouragement to me. And the way he talks about it, I'm like, I can do that.
You can do it.
I can do that the way he does it.
Right.
And our students hear it and they know, oh, I can go to a friend
Right.
to the coffee shop and we can sit down and talk about what scripture is teaching us about God.
It's modeled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really great. All right. Last topic, evaluating discipleship progress. So similar to the question we discussed before where we talked about methods for measuring discipleship, Lifeway Research also asks pastors if they regularly evaluate discipleship progress in their congregations and then what metrics they use to evaluate that progress. So tell us what you found in the research.
We found that just 3 in 10 pastors say they're regularly evaluating the discipleship progress within their own congregation. And that's essentially where we want the progress to be happening, individuals following Christ more closely. And when we ask about the details, we only could ask the details of those who are doing it. And so the percentages may look high, but it's a percentage of that 29%. And so it's really less than 20% are looking at the most common thing, which is how many are serving. A similar number are looking at how many are at key stages of that church's discipleship process. Those are good questions to be asking. Less than 15% are looking at how many new leaders they have. And half that many are doing a survey of the congregation to find out. So that's a pretty small number of churches doing regular evaluation. So, the methods they're using are going to be some really tiny numbers. But the metrics that they mentioned they're using are not bad things. We wouldn't put all our eggs in just one of those. But those are good signals that some good things are happening.
So I'll ask both of you. Both of you can jump in. So what things should pastors and other ministry leaders be measuring?
I think the things on this list are a good start. To me, it comes back to how do we in your church specifically communicate discipleship? And so and maybe this is wrong of me. I don't want to just immediately label like these are the things that you count, right? Because if I'm in, okay, here's a perfect example. The church that we attend right next to a university. Part of our vision is reaching college and international students. That's a unique vision for our church that wouldn't apply to any of them. So for us, in saying like discipleship as we measure it, as we would measure, for us, it's looking at that. Like, are we reaching this specific? And so I think that's why this is an important question to identify at a church level of, man, what is the vision that God's giving your church to reach specifically your people? And at this stage, right? Like you may be looking going, 80% of our church has been baptized within the last 6 months. If that's you, praise the Lord.
Yeah.
But you have a unique season that you've got to identify in different ways. But I think that these are great to look at, specifically if we identify and we want to see people leading and teaching, then we've got to figure out the path to get there.
To get them there, yeah.
And so part of me, I know that's a non-answer to your question.
It's okay.
But hopefully the audience really hears my heart in understanding their people.
Yeah.
I think the better answer to your question, not better than what you said, but
yeah, Scott, I get it, buddy. I get it.
Better than a bad answer is the more we can get to where individual believers are in their walk with Christ. Where are you on your journey?
Yeah.
But understanding that across your congregation. And so the closer whatever our metrics are getting to that that knowledge, that snapshot at any point in time, we've got a better set of metrics. Because yes, we want to know if people are a part of our process, because that's the things we're intentionally doing. We have these activities, how many people are involved, how many people never show up. Those are important things to look at. But ultimately, we're only doing those processes because we want them to be closer to Christ. How's that going?
Yeah.
And so, yes, things like assessments try to open up that conversation. Hopefully, the leaders of the small groups and Sunday school classes in a church are having some of those conversations. And so maybe as a church leader, as a pastor, I need to have some conversations with those group leaders. Ask them, how are things going with the people in your group?
Yeah, because it's so important to remember that, and I think it's why it comes back to a lot of times pastors point to, like, biblical literacy, those type of things, or serving. Those are easier things to count.
Yes.
Or we have like a teaching plan, right? That falls into it, those type of things. But a lot of what we're talking about is like being like Christ, denying yourself. Like there's not a 7, you know what I mean, on the scale, or like I get a B+ this month, right? But all of those type of things and what we're talking about, and it goes back to what many of the ministers agreed on. This is done in relationship.
Right.
It requires you to know me.
Mm-hmm.
It requires you to ask me sometimes really hard questions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we all want in our church. And I think being a leader that can communicate that and to say, this is what discipleship is, and to be okay with it being messy, I think is a good place to be at.
That's great. I love that we've been able to dive into this research some, and I'm looking forward to having more conversations with you guys about the future State of Discipleship study pieces that are going to come out of this that we'll be releasing over the next several months, really, through 2026. So let's take a few minutes to answer some questions that have come in through the chat. First off, how do we connect disciple makers and those who want to be discipled in the church?
That's a great problem to have.
Yeah, it is.
I think there's a few different ways that I've seen that being effective in churches. I think identifying who are your disciple makers. A lot of time, depending on the size of your church, ministers connecting those people, being like, hey, you take them to coffee type thing. That often works. I've seen some really effective, this is the bad word again, programs, right? That, Sunday night, Wednesday night, those type of things where it's like week 1 is here at the church, right? You're going to get connected into, a 1-on-3 type discipleship group. We've got one person that's wanting to disciple. Here are people that are willing to be discipled. But casting that vision of that's what this time is going to be, even if it's not going to be at the church every week, but we're going to start it, giving people an actual starting place. And to be very honest with our culture of like, these are going to run for 6 months or whatever your time frame is, also gives people a little bit like less stress of like, I'm signing up for something for the rest of my life, can sometimes be really helpful in that. And so relationship is often a good place to kind of begin with.
That's really good. Scott or Chad, either one of you can jump in and answer this. Research is showing that a growing percentage of pastors are bivocational, which I think you would agree with that. Please offer encouragement and support to those who are busy with a full-time job and trying to grow discipleship in a small church.
Yeah, no, that's very real. One of the things the survey found was that 38% of churches did not have a person responsible for discipleship at the church. And so I'm sure when a pastor's thinking about all of these concepts and thinking, wow, I've got to have this on my plate too.
Right.
That just feels overwhelming, especially if you're bivocational. And so I think for pastors in any size church, I think you've got to be thinking about, I need a key leader to be leading this ministry. And And they won't be alone either, but they're giving day-to-day leadership to it. And so especially for a bivocational pastor, that's going to be important.
Right.
But that's going to be somebody who's making sure that those key principles are in front of other leaders all year long. So we're not losing sight of what we're trying to do, our intentional plan as a church, what we're trying to accomplish. And so that way the activities that churches are good at, 99% of churches have the activities, but if somebody's keeping the key principles in front of them, then the activities are going to be more effective because they're driving home, they're landing the plane. And if you don't have a key person at the church, then everybody at the church is going to either be looking to the pastor or looking to nobody. And so having a key person makes sure that they can get their questions answered and their roadblocks covered.
Well, it gives away ownership. It's also like the believing that, God is equipping your church and he's put people with certain giftings, in your church. And so there are probably people inside of every church that far more administrative, better teacher, all of these kind of things, and allowing them to use their gift in that way and finding somebody that can help with some of those administrative places, whether you're full-time or bivocational. Giving it away, allowing your church to have ownership and leadership gives them importance in it, and they want to see it succeed. This is definitely true in kids and student spaces as well in this process.
So here's a great kind of logistical question. How do we convince church leaders the importance of providing childcare for women's discipleship programs so more women can be ministered to? And I know that's a real pain point for women's ministries, making sure that there's childcare.
You're giving me flashbacks to when I was a discipleship pastor for a little bit.
All right.
No, because it's reality. I mean, finding place for kids so parents can meet, and every church is going to have different limitations, budget required, all of those type of things that are in this question. And so it's not as easy as it sounds of get somebody to watch all the kids, right? You've got safety issues, all of those to take into consideration. I will say, and this isn't a one size fits all, one of the helpful things that we began to do with our small groups is we connected groups together to where they were able to support each other. So if you had a specific group that met, for us, we had different times of the week that they would meet. And so you had certain groups that if they meet on Sunday night, then they could rotate with that group of who watched the kids, that kind of stuff. And so we played with some of those type of things. I'd love to tell you that it was the perfect solution. It's not, because you have difficulties and all of that, all of those kind of things. I think though, when it comes to specifically talking to senior leadership, instead of just coming in with one specific idea, always approach it of, hey, how can we help try to figure out a solution here? And that looks different than here's my idea, make it happen. Is often a much better way to kind of approach some of those type of things.
That's great. One more question. Is there a digital spiritual gift assessment available that someone could have access to? And if there's not right now, is that possibly going to be a part of the Disciples Path toolkit?
It's not as of right now, a spiritual gift test is not part of the Disciples Path.
Okay.
The assessment that we're going to be working on, Disciples Path, is connection with kind of our 8 signposts of discipleship to allow individual people to be able to indicate kind of where they're at spiritually. There's also some assessment for the church leaders to evaluate the process of it. I know that Lifeway does have a spiritual gift test that you can search for online.
Okay, great. I'm looking one more time. Let's see. Okay, this is a great question. How can I connect and find assistance? So I will answer that. So Chad, you mentioned earlier that our adult ministry team here at Lifeway has a discipleship newsletter. And I would say that is a great tool for getting into this discipleship community that Lifeway is creating, with some great content, some articles that will help discipleship leaders in the church, just with some really great equipping content. So you can sign up for that newsletter you mentioned at lifeway.com, clicking on the adult ministries link, and then on there clicking on the newsletter, and you can sign up for that. And then also, we would love for you to be a part of our Lifeway Research community, and you can sign up for our newsletter at lifewayresearch.com/newsletter. It's right there, and the webinar on the screen. And we will continue to be revealing more research and insights that we're learning from the State of Discipleship study. So please sign up for that so you can keep up with all the new research that's coming out. And we also include articles written by leaders within Lifeway, but also church leaders who are, in the field like you guys, and they're writing articles about what they're learning in their ministry context. So you can learn from other ministry leaders that way. Well, we are about out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Scott, thanks for being here. Thanks for all the great research you guys are doing on the Lifeway Research team. Chad, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thanks for all your great insight. And we look forward to more of these webinars where we unpack Lifeway Research studies. So again, hope you'll sign up for the Lifeway Research newsletter, the discipleship newsletter from Lifeway, and we hope that you'll come back and join us for another webinar in the future. We want to thank you for all that you're doing in your local churches to help make disciples, because we know that the church flourishes when disciples are being made.